Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by, and I hope you're all safe and taking care of yourselves and your family. Macro thoughts, let me start there. We've had a rebound in the stock markets, and the point I want to make, which is one I made in February, is that the virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved. I know we've seen some flattening, but it remains unresolved. As I said on the 24th of February, a rate cut or even four will produce a dead cat bounce and then a dynamic move to the downside. I said then policymakers cannot vaccine the market with rate cuts, and I stand by that opinion. This is non-linear and exponential. Current spin on Wall Street, peak past, economy reopening soon, equities back to old records in 2021. That's Willem Middle Coup. And I subscribe to that point of view. 22nd of March, I was quoting Bill Gates, who's rode back from this position a little bit, but he said then, coronavirus has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. And we are moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine, and a complete quarantine is the only way to vaccine this 21st century world of ours. In Goethe's 1831 drama Faust, look at what advice he received. This again is from Wilhelm Middelkoop. And we had a big momentum move on gold yesterday. The futures crossed $1,700. This is a chart from yesterday via Gold Seek. And I think this is a once-in-a-century opportunity for gold. We know Scott Burke gave us that image of the print shop that were embarked on a massive money printing exercise. My timing was a little bit off, but on the 24th of February, you will recall, I said the viral moment has arrived. And then I said I would venture gold is correlated to the coronavirus, which is set to turn parabolic and is already non-linear and exponential. My timing was off, but I still remained convinced of the correctness of that call. And therefore, I reiterated it on the 22nd of March. I still believe gold will soon turn viral to the upside, and I'm looking for $2,000 plus. We're currently at $1,650 and trading around there. This is another opportunity to get in. Home thoughts, I sincerely wish Boris Johnson a speedy recovery. We had a really engaging conversation one day, I think it was last year, and he used a word called syncretism and then asked the audience if anyone knew what it meant. And I did, and we had a big discussion about the linguistic origins of the word and what it meant and a lot more. And he's a terribly witty man. And I therefore wish him a speedy recovery. Ocean Park says its resident giant pandas Ying Ying and Lei Lei have mated naturally for the first time since they started trying a decade ago. And I thought that was some good news in a bad news world. The zeitgeist of a time is its defining spirit or its mood, and the zeitgeist of 2020 is simply indescribable. But Ragnar van Tonderson put out a lovely photograph of the evening and of yachts on the water. This is a 392 years old Greenland shark that was located in the Arctic Ocean. He's been wandering the ocean since 1627. Photo by Julius Nielsen. It certainly does feel like a decade of semiotic arousal when everything it seemed was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. And a 392-year-old shark popping up might well be a harbinger. This is the moment the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem was closed due to coronavirus. Last time this happened was in 1349 during the Black Death, a bubonic plague pandemic. It's a virus, yes, in and of itself it holds no moral brief, but it's definitely more than a virus. Arundhati Roy, in an extraordinary article, "The Pandemic is a Portal." This morning I saw a neighbour talking to her cat. It was obvious she thought her cat understood her. I came into my house, told my dog, we laughed a lot, Sun Chartist. COVID-19, I'm so excited. It's time to take out the garbage. What should I wear? Sun Chartist again. And my article over the weekend was about the way we live now. It certainly is a new 21st century that we find ourselves in. A luminous and fairy tale feel to life in quarantine. And as you know, most fairy tales have an oftentimes dark and dangerous and unspoken undercurrent. I quoted Don DeLillo, "Everything is barely weeks, everything is days, we have minutes to live," and it certainly feels like we're pirouetting at the precipice. And our leaders are saying, don't panic, and I want to say, look chum, you're not Merkel, and just a few days ago you were telling me it's all cool, it's just the flu. Others might take you seriously. On what basis, I know not, but I don't. What I do know is this regime implosion is coming to the oil producers, and Trump can game the price a little more, sure, but it's a pointless exercise. Demand has cratered, and a return to a hyper-connected 100 million barrels per day world is not going to happen for the foreseeable future. Putin will survive because he prepared for this moment. Others are as good as terminated. I also know we're about to enter the Great Depression. The Fed, the ECB, and all the other central banks can print, but at some point it turns Weimar Germany. Before it turns Weimar Germany, it falls off a cliff in emerging markets. We're watching the great decoupling unfold in front of our eyes. From Brazil to South Africa to India, 20 years of good times are now ended. Africa is too dreadful to contemplate. We're weeks away now from collapsing healthcare systems and blow-ups in our urban centres. Ramaphosa and Kagame might have a chance, but everywhere else I look, leadership is as clueless as Trump is in his White House briefing. When and how does the coronavirus pandemic end? This is an article in Bloomberg. With confirmed cases of COVID-19 globally exceeding 1 million, and more countries going into lockdown to slow the pandemic, the emerging question is, when will this all end? There are two paths to that outcome. One is immunization. Researchers would have to develop a vaccine that proves safe and effective against the coronavirus, and health authorities would have to get it to a sufficient number of people. The second path to herd immunity is grimmer. It can also come about after a large portion of a community has been infected with a pathogen and develops resistance to it that way. That is the Africa way. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jenny Harris said lockdown measures there need to last 2, 3 or ideally up to 6 months. Anneliese Wilder-Smith, a professor of emerging infectious diseases at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, recommends restrictions stay in place until daily cases drop consistently over at least 2 weeks. The virus is wreaking so much havoc, not because it's especially lethal, but because it's insidious. Many who are infected are well enough to go about their daily business, unwittingly spreading it to others. As I said in a tweet, the COVID-19 is a karmic level stealth assassin. Maybe our biggest strength in Germany, said Professor Krauslich, is the rational decision-making at the highest level of government. Why are so many elites around the world flouting the rules they set for everyone else? The USA, obviously, Johnson stuck in UK hospital, now Scotland. And don't even get me started on Nigeria. Deutsche Bank, behavioral changes are the reason why we will not get a V-shaped recovery, and there is not much fiscal policy can do about it. I like this via WhatsApp. I think it is a great image of what I described as a hard stop, moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. Total confirmed cases, 1,347,803. Total deaths, 74,807. Total recovered, 277,402, Johns Hopkins. Remy, GMI, the virus has now been diagnosed in 183 countries. There are 14 countries with more than 10,000 active cases. The Malcolm Gladwell moment has definitively arrived. A tipping point moment in an epidemic is when a virus reaches critical mass. It's the boiling point. It's the moment on the graph when the line starts to shoot straight upwards. Dr. O, I've been skeptical about calls not to air Trump's pressers because of the disinformation, but now that he's telling people to don purple shrouds, cut off their balls and eat poison pudding, I'm coming around. As I said, many of us sit and watch the daily White House briefing. If you're asking why is the COVID-19 rate so low in Germany and high in your country, it's because their president used to be a quantum chemist and your president used to be a reality television host. A reality TV star botched the response to a global pandemic, and now we're all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. Jenna Friedman. Peter Navarro's Jan 29 memo to the National Security Council urging a China travel ban. He said the risk of a worst-case pandemic scenario should not be overlooked. And then Mr. Conway, individuals who do not possess a functioning conscience, the main feature of psychopathy, and cover up this lack with a grandiose sense of their own importance and specialness. And I put it in different words when I said the control machine has a novice, a hubristic ignoramus, in charge of the console. Their incurable character defect, known as narcissistic psychopathy, also closely enough malignant narcissism, is the most dangerous form of psychopathology known to humankind. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas. The defect is found in genocidal tyrants, mass killers, gurus, and toxic religious leaders, and many CEOs alike, their lack of conscience and their grandiosity that drive them to realize their main life objective. The US will most likely reach 500,000 confirmed cases milestone within a week. That's Remy again. International markets, currencies, euro is at 108.68, dollar index 100.341, Japanese yen 108.90, Swiss franc 0.9740, the pound, which had a wobble on the news of Boris 123.22, Australian dollar 0.6183, India rupee 75.7275, South Korean won 12.1905, Brazilian real 528.61, Egyptian pound 15.73. South African rand has rallied from over 19 to 1846. This is the dollar index, softened a little over the last 24 hours. Euro dollar 108.66. Crude oil, this rebound which we've seen since Trump's tweet, will come apart at the seams. We are no longer going to revert to 100 million barrels per day, and the demand destruction is far more than any of the proposed supply reductions. But the oil market moves in anticipation, and it's going to be sorely disappointed. Emerging markets, I've written in September last year about the China emerging markets frontier feedback loop phenomenon. The phenomenon was positive for the last 2 decades, but has now undergone a trend reversal. The fallout is being experienced as far away as Germany. The rand is the purest proxy for this phenomenon. African countries heavily dependent on China being the main taker are also at the bleeding edge of this phenomenon. This pressure point will not ease soon, but will continue to intensify. I wrote an article a few weeks ago in the Africa Report, Debt, Virus and Locusts Create a Perfect Storm for Africa. South Sudan has 4 ventilators and 5 vice presidents. Tweeted, "This is Freddie." And he said, "This is Africa." October last year, I was talking about Ozymandias, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck." I was talking about debt and sort of predicting that if there was an accident, it was going to be horrendous. We are staring into the abyss of a zombie apocalypse, in my view. 3rd of February, I was talking about how Bole is the epicenter. The numbers are not reflecting that epicenter risk. The number of confirmed cases in Africa has now surpassed 10,000, nearly 500 dead, Jeffrey York. But as I said, we're looking in the rearview mirror. 10,000 confirmed cases, 498 deaths, 910 recoveries, 51 affected countries, South Africa, Algeria, Egypt and Morocco, more than 1,000 cases, and numerous where there are more than 100. We know viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics, and in every country in the world, when the virus reaches 100 people, the number of cases begins to increase by 35% daily. At that rate, a country would reach 1 million cases just 31 days after reaching 100 cases. Just think about that. I said a few weeks ago, and now everyone's agreeing with me, that sub-Saharan Africa will contract in 2020. It is around the size of the contraction that's at issue. 2nd of March, I was saying the first issue is whether the coronavirus will infect the continent, because there's a lot of skepticism about that. Then we know that the coronavirus is exponential, non-linear, and multiplicative. We know what exponential disease propagation looks like in the real world. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Cluster, 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 and then boom. I was also asking how much we needed to haircut remittances by, and I was saying more than 25%. South Africa's economy may shrink as much as 4%, the central bank says. The past decade was the worst for South African growth, without total output expanding by only 15.9% between the first quarter of 2010 and the final quarter of 2019. Shortfall could exceed 10% of GDP this fiscal year. Largest shortfall on record was 11.6% of GDP in 1914, followed by 10.4% in 1940. The Treasury projected a gap of 6.8% for 2020-2021. As I said, we're staring into the abyss of a zombie apocalypse. South African All Shares down 19%. The Rand has rebounded as 1860, but still headed for 20. Egyptian Pound 1574. That's behaved very well. EGX 30 down 32.34%. In December, I was writing about how we needed to big up the dosage of Quaaludes. I was referencing many African countries, including Zambia, but also Nigeria. Moody's downgraded Nigeria to negative, and we learned that foreign investors were propping up the Naira to the tune of $16 billion via short-term certificates. I said then everyone knows how this story ends. When the music stops, everyone will dash for the exit and the currency will collapse just like it's collapsing in Lusaka as we speak. Fitch Ratings has downgraded Nigeria to B from B+ with a negative outlook, citing Nigeria's vulnerability to short-term capital outflows is high, given the sizable stock of portfolio investments in short-term Naira debt securities, equivalent to $27.7 billion and representing around 72% of FC reserves at the time. They are looking for $3.4 billion from the IMF, Rapid Financing Facility, World Bank $2.5 billion, AFDB $1 billion. All requested, no approval yet. Nigerian All Shares minus 23% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is minus 6.1% year to date. Kenya, new levies have been imposed on fuel, sale of homes and land for small-scale property owners in the proposed changes. It does not stop there. With flights cancelled, Kenyan farmers can no longer sell cut flowers or mange tout to European supermarkets, and tourism has collapsed. Blow to farmers as state shuts coffee auction. Closure came just 2 weeks after the tea auction in Mombasa was temporarily closed before intervention by stakeholders, which saw the move reversed. The shilling is at 106. Nairobi All Share is down 18.56% so far this year. NSE20 is down 24.04% this year. And Soy and BBC Africa Eye have an interesting documentary headlined Gangsters, Golf and Greenbacks. It's about Spencon. Thank you for listening.